Okay, this is the part 2 of the Chapter 12 materials, where we're talking more about controls that you can put on graphical user interface applications. And in this video, I'm going to be demonstrating an example of how to use the checkbox and radio button objects in your applications. I'm going to mention some other controls that I won't go into much detail on, but I will leave that detail in these slides, which are available on the Titanium website. And then I'll conclude this video by talking about having your controls in a nice layout on your form and how you can change what part of the form they're anchored to and docked with. So the checkbox and radio button objects are really helpful. They're things that you see all the time in practice, and they'll be useful for, I think, your project, and especially for the exam when we're creating some applications that have some more specific requirements where using a regular text box wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. So checkboxes and radio buttons are used when you want the user to be able to select something from a short list of options. The difference between them is with a set of checkboxes, the user can check as many as they want, and with radio buttons, the user can only select one. When they select a different one, then the one that was selected before becomes not selected anymore. The main properties and methods that we work with when we use checkboxes and radio buttons are these three. The checked property, which indicates whether the checkbox or radio button is currently checked by the user. The text property, which should be obvious, is the text displayed to the right of the actual box or button. And then the default event that's generated with one of these types of controls is the checked change method. And this is similar to when we put buttons on our form and we double click them. It created a default event, which was a click method. For these, when you double click on them, then your code will automatically generate a checked changed method, and you can specify something that happens as soon as the user clicks on one of those options. So I'm going to jump over to my code window, the design view, and you'll see that I've already started a new application. And the example that I'm going to use to show you how to do these programming concepts is this pizza parlor application. So you're going to put some options for the user to select a size and toppings, and then when you press the order button, then you're going to create the code that's going to calculate the price that the user needs to pay. So if you want to follow along, pause the video and create a new Windows Forms application and put these 5 labels and this one button on the form, and then come back and resume the video. What I'm going to do now is in my toolbox, I'm going to add from my common controls some radio buttons. So we add these the same way we would add a text box or a button. I'm going to put 3 of those, which represent the 3 options for pizza sizes: small, medium, and large. So for each of these, they have their own set of properties. And we'd want to name them accordingly. So this one I'm going to rename to be small radio button, and its text, I'll just have it say small. And then do the same for medium and large. Okay, and then I'm going to add a set of checkboxes underneath this toppings area. We can have pepperoni, and tomatoes. I'll just have two just to keep this example simple. Now we haven't added any functionalities to these yet, but if we run our application, you can see that for the radio buttons, you can just select one. And for the for the checkboxes, you can have neither selected, both selected, or only one. So that's the difference between the two. Now we can add some code to our button to calculate the price based on what the user selects from these choices. So we can use the checked property of our radio buttons and checkboxes to check which things the user selected. So let's double click on our order button. And we are going to have a variable that we call price, because that's what we want to calculate here. We're going to start it at 0. Now we're going to check what the user selected. So for the size radio buttons, we can say if small radio button dot checked and this checked property holds a value of either true or false. It's a Boolean value. And so here I've explicitly checked if this is equal to true. This part of the statement is actually not necessarily, because this in and of itself is a Boolean expression that can be evaluated as true or false. So if the checked value is set to true, then this control statement will be evaluated as true. I'm actually going to call this base price instead of just price. So the base price for that we'll say is 8. Else, if the medium radio button is checked, then the base price is 10. Else, if a large radio button is checked, then our base price is going to be 12. Else, so if nothing at all is checked, we could do some error message or something. For now, we'll just keep the base price set to 0. Okay, so these are exclusive options because only one of these can be selected. So that's why I've done if, else if, else if. The checkboxes, on the other hand, are not exclusive, so we wouldn't want to use if, else if, else if. We just want to have separate if statements. So if the pepperoni checkbox is checked, then we do something. And then independently, if the tomato checkbox is checked, then we'll do something. So we have a base price. I'm also going to have a toppings price and a total price. So if the pepperoni checkbox is checked, then the toppings price, I'm going to add $1.50 to it. If the tomato checkbox is checked, and we'll say that tomato is $1. And so we use these decision structures to check what the user has checked, which radio buttons and which checkboxes. And then at the end, we can calculate our total price as the base price plus the toppings price. And then we can display in our label, I had put a label that says, that I called price label. And we can have our price label text display the price of your pizza is, and then plus the total price formatted as currency. I'm going to test that. Okay, so if I have a small with tomato, that should be a base price of $8 plus $1 for tomato. The price of your pizza is $9. Okay, so this was an example of inside of the button click method checking what the property of the checked property of the checkboxes and the radio buttons. You can also have something happen immediately when the user selects a radio button or a checkbox. So for example, if I double click on the small radio button, it will generate a small radio button checked changed method. So this is what happens when this radio button is either selected or deselected, checked or unchecked. So here we could say if, when that happens, when the user clicks on it, not if. So when the user clicks on that radio button, we could have another label just telling the user, even before we calculate the grand total, we can call this the size price label. And I'll start it blank. So we could have the size price label text be set to the price of a small pizza is $8. And then we could do the same thing for a medium, for our medium radio button. When the user presses on it, we can say the price of a medium pizza is $10. And if the user clicks on the large radio button, we can have it say the price of a large pizza is $10 or $12. Okay, so that's radio buttons and checkboxes. I did want to mention, and I have this in the slides, you can use group boxes or panels which are containers that hold other controls on a form, and they can be anchored or docked inside of a form. These are especially useful if you want to have more than one set of radio buttons. And they work. There's a few minor differences between them that are shown here on the slide. Group boxes can display a caption, but don't have scroll bars. Panels have scroll bars, but don't display a caption. So I'll just show you on my design view. If I wanted to add another set of radio buttons over here that was like choose a drink or something, and these are totally independent from the pizza size radio buttons, we have a problem because you can only select one radio button on the entire form. However, what we can do is add a group box. And this isn't in the common controls, but if you go to all Windows forms, you can add a group box. The text property of this group box will be this caption that you have. So this could be sizes available. And then we could put these radio buttons inside of this group box. And now, I'll just show you. These radio buttons out here are independent from these radio buttons over here. Okay, I'm going to mention a few other controls quickly. A link label is similar to a label, but it provides the capability so that when the user clicks on it, it opens up a web browser and goes to a web page. And the default event associated with this is that obviously what I just said, that a web browser will open up. And here are some common properties and methods associated with that. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this, but you can explore it on your own. But let me just add one so that you can have an example of the code if you want to download this Pizza Parlor code. Okay, I'm going to delete these radio buttons. I didn't actually need them. I'm going to add a link label. And I'm going to have the text say, visit our website. Now, to actually make that link work, if we double click on it, it will generate a new event method. What happens when link is clicked? And I'm not going to go into tons of detail of this, but I will put the code in here so that you can see it. I'm going to type system.diagnostics.process.start, and what this does is it opens another application on the computer, such as Internet Explorer, or you could do Chrome, and then you can provide some arguments. So if we wanted this to open up Google, right, this pizza parlor is pretend it doesn't have a real web page. But what this will do is this tells the computer, start up Internet Explorer and type in this argument. Then we could make our link label, it has a property called link visited. And we could make that be true, so it keeps a history of whether or not we visited a link. And we can change the visited link color to be whatever color we want. By default it's purple, well, not by default, but generically it's purple. We could have it be like forest green or whatever we want it to be. Now if I run this code, oh, I've got errors. Oh, I spelled link visited wrong. Here we go. Now if we click on that, you probably can't see this, but it's opening Internet Explorer. And then it made the link become green. Okay, another useful control that you can put on your form is the month calendar. And that allows the user to pick a date on the calendar, and you can retrieve and do things with those dates. Um, so the month calendar control has several properties, such as the selection range, selection start. Those are dates that the user selected. And the default method is date change. So that's what happens when a user clicks on a date. You can make something happen when the user clicks on that date. So for example, if I add a calendar, it's called month calendar. So don't look under the C's, it's under the M's. Add it over here. I could have the user enter their birthday and then say that we'll send them a coupon code sometime before their birthday. So when we want something to happen when the user clicks on the calendar, double click it and that will generate a method. And I have another label down here. I called it the date label. So what I want to happen is when the user clicks on the calendar, this date label text will be replaced and say you clicked on whatever date they clicked on, and then we'll send you a coupon code a few days before that. So we can have our date label text be the date you chose is, and then we can retrieve the date that they chose using the selection start property. So we have the month calendar one, that's the name of the control, dot selection start, that's the name of the property, which is the date that they chose. And then we can convert that to a number of different string formats. So I'm going to choose to short date string. You could also try doing to long date string. And the documentation for all of these is in the textbook and on Microsoft's website. I'm just giving you a small sampling of the different things you can do with these controls. I forgot my parentheses on my method. There we go. And then we could also, on the next line, have the application say, we'll send you a code on. Here's something else interesting you can do with dates is you can add or subtract dates to or from the date that the user selected. So if the user selected June 20th, we could actually, there are methods to add days to that. So that would be like if the date they chose was June 20th and we chose to add 3 days, then this would be equivalent to June 23rd. On the other hand, if we let's just do the add method. So we'll say 3 days. And then format that as a date. So this would mean that they'll send you a code 3 days after the date that they selected. So instead of saying we'll send you a code on, we'll say we'll send you code by. So they choose their birthday and then we tell them that we'll send you code and no later than 3 days after that. So I will run the application and show you how that works. So if the user clicks on June 21st, then it says we'll send you a code by June 24th. Oh, I made a mistake here. I wanted to not overwrite that text, but add to it. So the date you chose is June 20th. June 21st, we'll send you a code by June 24th. Okay, menu strips are also a common thing. So if you have an application you want to have like a file, edit, view menu, like a lot of applications have, that is available to you. You can explore that on your own time. That's called the menu strip. There are also list boxes, combo boxes, and checklist boxes. So make sure you check out these slides and the textbook for more detail on those. But here's an example of what they look like. The combo box is a drop-down menu. The checklist box is a contained set of checkboxes. You can also add pictures to your form. A lot of students in the past have done this for their project to make it look more interesting. That is the PictureBox control, and you use the image property to select an image from your computer. The last thing I want to mention is working with a form's layout. You might have noticed when you drag controls onto the form, there are those blue snap lines that help you line things up. Those are nice. You can also use the location property in the properties list to specify an exact location. So if you want to, like 100 pixels to the right and 20 pixels down, you can specify that. I did want to show you the anchor and dock properties in an example, and you can play with the padding property on your own time as well. But I just wanted to mention the anchor and docking properties. So if we choose, let's say, this calendar, well, all of the controls have the anchor and dock properties, but I'm going to choose this calendar to show as an example. What we can do is the anchor property tells us where it's anchored to on the application, and it's anchored to the top left. So what that means is when we run this application, then if we change the size of this form, everything is anchored to the top left. Everything stays on the top left. But if we go back and say, instead, I want this calendar to be anchored to the top right, then when we run the application, it will stick to that right side and to the top. The dock property makes it so that when your form changes size, your control stretches to fit with it if it is docked to something. So by default, the docking is none. But if I wanted it docked to this right side, you kind of see it messed up my layout a little bit. But I'll show you what happens when you change that dock property. It stretches out to match the size of your form. So I'll let you play around with those options a little bit. Just remember that's anchor and dock. Anchoring is in relation to what side of the form it sticks to. Dock is having it kind of stuck to and stretched with the form. All right, keep exploring controls and properties. This is just a small sample. Have fun with it, be creative, and I'll see you in the next video.